It is Thursday, August 4th, 23 days until the college football season. You're watching right on Q College Sports. Welcome in and welcome back. That is right. You are watching right on Q College Sports. I am your host, Tyson Quiller. Thanks so much for the support. Thanks for checking us out. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Feel free to share this content with anyone you think might find it interesting. As always, send me your feedback. You can get us at RightOnQCS on Twitter or send me an email, rightonqcs@gmail.com. We're getting some pretty good traction on our first three previews, conference previews for the 2022 college football season. We've covered the Mountain West Conference, Pac-12, American Athletic Conference, and today we will be diving into the Big 12 Conference. After Oklahoma won the conference 6 years in a row, they finally got knocked off the top of the mountain by Baylor last year. They were your conference champion from 2021. You might remember Oklahoma State and Baylor were right there at the top. They played each other in a conference championship game. There was a possibility Oklahoma State could have made the playoff, but they ended up dropping the ball, losing to Baylor. Baylor is your 2021 Big 12 Conference champion. So let's kind of take a look at this conference a little macro level here. I mean, when you consider where the Big 12 Conference was at this time last year, we had just kind of heard the news that Texas and Oklahoma were moving to the SEC as of 2023. Fast forward to now, since then, the Big 12 pinned an agreement with UCF, Houston, Baylor, and Cincinnati to join the conference starting next year. Cincinnati coming off of a playoff appearance. Houston finished 12-2 and a top 20 ranking last year. And BYU has gone 21-4 in the last two seasons, finishing top 20 in both of those seasons as well. How about for the teams that are staying? Oklahoma State and Baylor, like I said, finished 1-2 in the conference last year. These two teams are staying. And then the teams that are leaving, Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, Oklahoma lost Lincoln Riley. They got completely gutted in the transfer portal. And as for Texas, I mean, they finished below 500 last year for the first time in 5 years. I mean, given what we first thought, again, this time last year, Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 have really done a pretty masterful job. And the conference is actually in a very stable position heading into this season. So having navigated all of this successfully, Bob Bowlesby announced that he is stepping down as the Big 12 commissioner. And so begins the Brett Yormark era as the new commissioner. He's already been busy with the situation that took place with USC and UCLA leaving. He's been fielding phone calls from teams like Colorado, Utah, Arizona State about interest in joining the Big 12. Big 12 is in a very stable position right now. And they finished the season last year with 3 teams ranked in the top 10 in the country. That's very impressive. Although down a bit from previous years, and knowing that Texas and Oklahoma will be leaving is going to be a big hit to revenue, the Big 12 still reported $680 million in football revenue last year. So let's take a look at this season. 3 programs made changes at head coach. The first move was made by Texas Tech when they fired Matt Wells on October 25th. They announced the hiring of Joey McGuire November 8th. McGuire had been a defensive coordinator at Baylor for the past 5 years. He's had a ton of success on the defensive side of the ball, but has no head coaching experience. I think Texas Tech really has been kind of in disarray ever since firing Mike Leach in 2009, but Texas Tech fans, you can discuss that amongst yourselves. TCU then moved on from their longtime head coach, Gary Patterson, and hired Sonny Dykes. He was SMU's head coach since 2018. They hired him on November 27th. After going just 5-7 in his first season, they've gone 9-3 in the last 3 seasons at SMU under Sonny Dykes. There really wasn't much national coverage of either of those changes. The same, though, cannot be said for our third coaching change. After 5 seasons at the helm for the Oklahoma Sooners, Lincoln Riley left Norman to take the head coaching position at USC. Listen, I mean, SC gave him a 10-year, $110 million contract. They bought his Norman home. They purchased him a home in L.A. They really gave him pretty much anything that he wanted. But the story for the Big 12 is that Clemson's defensive coordinator and 3-time national champion Brent Venables was hired on December 5th by OU. Now, Venables has a long history with the Sooners. He was the defensive coordinator for OU from 2000 to 2012 and was on that staff that won the 2000 national championship. But like Joey McGuire, no head coaching experience. Overall, though, I think a very good hire for the Oklahoma Sooners. How about some major transfer portal news? So let's keep it with the Sooners here to start. In all, they had 13 players into the transfer portal. 10 of them signed with other teams. They lost their starting quarterback, Caleb Williams, one of their best wide receivers, Mario Williams, to USC. They lost their second best quarterback, Spencer Rattler, and their best tight end, Austin Stogner, to South Carolina. Stud wide receiver Jaden Hazelwood has transferred to Arkansas. Likely to be a starting linebacker this season, Jamal Morris has transferred to Houston. In the secondary, defensive back Latrell McCutcheon left for USC, and safety Patrick Fields transferred to Stanford. Like I said, gutted. The Sooners did bring in, though, 2 QBs from the portal. The likely starter will be UCF transfer Dylan Gabriel. He was voted in the media poll as the conference newcomer of the year preseason. They also picked up a handful of talented skill players on both sides of the ball. I'll get into that kind of a bit more later when we talk about Oklahoma. Steve Sarkisian's staff at Texas did a pretty dang good job in the portal as well, picking up 5-star quarterback Quinn Ewers, who is, currently in a quarterback competition with Hudson Card right now, but he will be the likely starter. They also picked up Alabama tight end Jaleel Billingsley, who is, a pretty consistent 260-yard, 3-touchdown per year guy the last couple years. Kansas State picked up Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez. He's a real talented player, but had some issues in processing the game. He's hoping for a fresh start and that can change his image. TCU lost their stud running back Zach Evans to Ole Miss, and one of their best defensive players, edge Ojuan Mathis, to Nebraska. Senior defensive back Tanner McAllister left the Oklahoma State Cowboys for Ohio State, and the first-team All-Big 12 defensive back Jarek Bernard left Stillwater for LSU. That Oklahoma State secondary last year was outstanding, but the defense was pilfered in the offseason, to include their defensive coordinator Jim Knowles taking the same job at Ohio State. Now let's take a look at some players to watch entering the 2022 season. I already mentioned his name, Dylan Gabriel, the new quarterback at Oklahoma, has the best Heisman odds right now at plus 3,000. Those are the 5th best odds of winning the Heisman in the country. In 3 years as a starter for UCF, Gabriel threw twice for more than 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns. His season was cut short last year because of injury. It kind of remains to be seen if he has fully recovered from breaking that collarbone against Louisville last year. The headline running back in the conference this season is Bijan Robinson at Texas. Side note, Robinson announced this summer an NIL partnership with Lamborghini of Austin. This dude has been very successful at marketing himself in this new frontier of college football. But back to the field, Robinson rushed for over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns in his second season with the Horns last year. He also had 295 yards and 4 touchdowns receiving out of the backfield. He is a stud. He is the media's preseason prediction for Conference Player of the Year. Now, Robinson may be the headliner, but I think the best back in the conference is Deuce Vaughn at Kansas State. He rushed for 1,400 yards and a whopping 18 touchdowns last year. He also added 468 yards and 4 touchdowns receiving out of the backfield. And now he finally has some semblance of a passing threat in the backfield. No offense to Skylar Thompson, but he was really pretty limited in the passing game. Keep an eye out for Deuce Vaughn this season, I'm just telling you. Others to look out for on offense, really unknown but tremendous upside. Quinn Ewers comes into Texas from Ohio State as one of the most highly rated recruits in the country. Like I said, he's in a quarterback battle with Hudson Card. I'm certain Quinn Ewers will be the starter. Elsewhere at Texas, wide receiver Xavier Worthy had almost 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns last year as a freshman. The connection from Ewers to Worthy could be pretty deadly this year. At Oklahoma State, quarterback Spencer Sanders, who looked great in the Fiesta Bowl win over Notre Dame last year. Dude put up 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, and rushed for 125 yards. I would keep my eye on Spencer Sanders at Oklahoma State. You do also have JT Daniels transferring from Georgia to West Virginia. How about on the defensive side of the ball? Iowa State edge Will McDonald led the conference with 11.5 sacks last year. He also forced 5 fumbles. He's just a complete game wrecker and must be accounted for pre-snap. At Oklahoma State, DN Brock Martin is back for his senior season as well. He went for 41 tackles, 9 sacks last year. But OSU has been pretty depleted on the defense, so he's going to be relied upon pretty heavily this year. Kansas State, Mike linebacker Daniel Green is back for his junior season. He's an absolute force in the box. 89 tackles, 3 sacks last year. This will be a strong linebacking core with Brandon Jennings transferring in from Maryland as well. The leading returning tackler in the Big 12 is Kenny Logan Jr. at Kansas. In addition to 100 tackles, he also had an interception and a forced fumble last season. Listen, most NFL scouts believe TCU's Travius Hodges-Tomlinson is the best secondary player in the conference. Both of these players play for kind of middle of the road to bad teams, bad in the case of Kansas for sure. Now, let's take a look here at our conference power rankings. You can see in the first column here is the power rankings. Second column is their record from last year. I think, man, considering how much Oklahoma got pilfered in the transfer portal, they really brought back some key pieces. And the schedule shapes up pretty nicely for them. They still, I think, are the team to beat. Oklahoma State is going to be poised to meet them in the conference championship. Baylor regresses a little bit. Baylor, Texas, Kansas State, I think, are kind of interchangeable 3-5 there. Then there's a pretty substantial drop off. Iowa State and TCU. Iowa State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech really lost a ton of production. So I wouldn't think that they would be all that much of a factor. TCU has quite a large variance, and I think Kansas is actually going to be improved. So let's start off here with the Oklahoma Sooners. I mentioned all of the turnover in this program, but they still wind up with a top 10 power ranking. On offense, they pick up Dylan Gabriel has really steadied the ship. If he has recovered fully from that collarbone injury, he really could be the offensive player of the year in the Big 12. Eric Gray finally gets his shot starting in the backfield after transferring from Tennessee in 2021. He's really kind of a consistent five yards or more per carry for the last few seasons. The Sooners also have a solid change of pace third down back in Marcus Majors, going 6 foot 220, a little bigger frame. The Sooners O-line returns a lot. All 5 big uglies have starting experience, and they go an average of 305 pounds across the front. This is going to buy Gabriel some time to reach a very experienced receiving core in the open field. Marvin Mims is the headliner, having gone for over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns in each of the last 2 years. Mims was 4th in the country in yards per reception at 22.3 last year. So, basically, if you can get the ball in his hands, he is pretty explosive. Perhaps we should start the defensive conversation off by saying the new head coach, Brent Venables, is maybe the best defensive mind in college football today. Now, it'll take some time for this unit to come along, as 5 of their top 6 tacklers from last year are gone. There is a sophomore starting in every position group, but you do have a solid returning leader in Will linebacker Deshaun White, who started every game last year. Junior Woody Washington will head up the nickel secondary with 3 new starters. There are some great passers in this conference, so this group is going to need to progress pretty quickly. Up front, though, Jeffrey Johnson transferred in from Tulane at nose tackle to join a pretty stellar position group at 6'2", 305. So, this D-line is pretty much as imposing as the O-line. The Sooners recovered 12 fumbles last year, and that helped cover up for some holes on this side of the ball. I think this is where they're going to need to develop a little bit more in the last couple of weeks here before the season starts. The Sooners, looking at the schedule, will jump out to a 2-0 record, but do not overlook that Week 3 matchup at Nebraska. Nebraska is going to be much better this year, and you're playing in Memorial Stadium. That is no joke. The schedule shapes up really pretty nicely, though, for the Sooners in Venables' first season. You get Kansas State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State all at home. The Sooners will be favored in probably every game this year. I'm going to just call it. Mark them down for the Big 12 championship game. I can't really see them making the playoff, so I'll go ahead and give them 11-1 going to the Big 12 championship game. How about the Oklahoma State Cowboys? Although this offense isn't as explosive as the Sooners, their calling card is that they are very efficient under first-team all-conference selection Spencer Sanders at quarterback. They were the 12th best first-down offense in the country last year. That gets you ahead of the chains and really kind of opens up the playbook. It's Dominic Richardson's turn at running back after 1,200-yard running back Jalen Warren moved on to the NFL. Richardson had just 79 carries last year, so he's a bit unproven. 3 of the Cowboys' top 5 receivers from last season are back in Presley, Owens, and Bray. But they'll have to make up for the loss of the number 1 target, unquestionably, Tay Martin. Oklahoma State will be trying to replace a 1,200-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver. Those are going to be some big shoes to fill. This O-line was strong last year and returns 4 starters. Transfer left guard Tyrone Weber has a lot of catching up to do, though. I think that's your vulnerability up front. This defense led the nation with 57 sacks last year. 20 and a half of them came from Colin Oliver and Brock Martin on the D-line, who are both back. This is one of the best D-lines in the country. In the linebacking group, though, the Cowboys team leader and first-team all-conference Malcolm Rodriguez went pro. This group is going to be really thin, as they brought in Xavier Benson from Texas Tech to join Mason Cobb, but both really kind of have limited experience. 3 of your best secondary players are gone. 3 of your best secondary players are gone in Jarek Bernard Converse, who now plays for LSU, Tanner McAllister, who is on scholarship at Ohio State, and Colby Harvell-Peel, who went pro. That's 163 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 4 interceptions that just walked out the door. First-team All-Big 12 Jason Taylor is back at safety, though. Listen, a lot has left, including defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, like I mentioned, but there's still a lot of talent here. This unit is definitely still a top 25 unit. The squad is going to cruise to a 3-0 start, setting up a huge matchup at Baylor on October 1st. You're at Kansas State and at Oklahoma later in the schedule. I think there's enough consistency on both sides of the ball with this squad, though. OU and Oklahoma State, I think, are really kind of a clear 1-2 this year. Look for the Cowboys to go 11-1, maybe 10-2 again. Now, how about the Baylor Bears? This was a top 10 rushing offense in the country last year. Now, only 65% of the production returns, though. But the Baylors have 2 offensive linemen on the first-team all-conference preseason in Connor Galvin and Jacob Gall at left tackle and center. Their stud tight end Ben Sims is first-team All-Big 12 as well. This offensive line is going to buy Blake Shapen a lot of time to work through his progressions. Quarterback Jerry Bohannon transferred to South Florida, and so in steps the aforementioned Blake Shapen. Although Bohannon wasn't sensational in the passing game, this is definitely a downgrade to the sophomore Shapen. The leading rusher for the Bears, Abram Smith, now plays for the New Orleans Saints, and your second leading rusher, Treston Edmer, went pro as well. Your top 3 receivers are all gone, including R.J. Sneed, who transferred to Colorado. The skill players on this offense are going to have a completely new look for Dave Aranda's 3rd year at the helm. Look for them to establish the run early behind that solid line and slowly integrate some creative passing schemes in. Baylor's defense had 3 players earn first-team all-conference honors last year, and 2 of them went pro in Jalen Petrie at safety and Terrell Bernard at linebacker. But the 3rd, Siaki Ika, is back and anchors a pretty formidable defensive line with Hall and Maxwell. In the linebacking core, preseason first-team All-Big 12 Dylan Doyle takes over at middle linebacker. The front 6 of this 3-3-5 set is really going to be pretty strong. This Baylor Bears squad forced 28 turnovers last year, which is top 10 in the country. But the secondary is really going to be tested. They are projected to start freshman Devin Lemire and sophomore Lorando Johnson. The high-flying passing teams in this conference, like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, they're really going to attack the lack of depth for sure in the secondary. Based on the strength of the front 6, this is still, I would say, a top 35 defense, but can the youth in the secondary develop quickly enough? Now, the Bears may have the toughest schedule in the Big 12 this year. Week 2 at top 15 BYU. You travel to West Virginia, which isn't going to be a cakewalk because they will be passing a lot with JT Daniels. In the last 4 weeks, you're at Oklahoma and Texas. You host a sneaky good Kansas State bunch. I really think Baylor, Texas, Kansas State, like I said, are pretty interchangeable. My prognosis, Baylor finishes 8-4, maybe 9-3 at the top end. On to Texas. The Longhorns had the top-ranked 2022 recruiting class in the Big 12, signing 2 5-star players in Devin Campbell, the top linebacker in the country, and Kelvin Banks, the 3rd-ranked offensive tackle in the country. As for this year's roster, though, running back Bijan Robinson is the preseason offensive player of the year in the conference. Xavier Worthy returns at wideout after being named Big 12 Newcomer of the Year last year, going for almost 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. And in comes Wyoming transfer Isaiah Neyor to the wideout fold, having put up 878 yards and 12 touchdowns a year ago. At tight end, you have a serious battle between stud Alabama transfer Jaleel Billingsley, who was kind of a consensus top 10 transfer in the country, and the sophomore Jatavion Sanders, who was a 5-star recruit from the 2021 class, the 13th best player in the ESPN 300 that year. There's just skill all over the place on this offense. So now that I built you up, let's get real. Texas has just one returning starting O-lineman. They will be starting a freshman at right guard, a sophomore at center, and a sophomore at left tackle. This is the line that's going to be asked to protect freshman quarterback Quinn Ewers, who has taken exactly 0 collegiate snaps. Now, Ewers was the number 1 recruit in the country in 2021 to Ohio State and has since transferred to Texas. I do believe he has definitely beaten out Hudson Card for the starting spot, but whoa, Nelly, is there a lot of brand new and unproven right here where you want certainty and stability to be. You know, I get a very similar feel about this Texas team that I do about USC. Massive skill pickups on offense, but the defense was the liability last year, and they really haven't made any major changes. This is a defense that gave up 30 or more points in 8 games last year. They had 101st ranked third down defense in the country. And do not forget, they gave up 57 points in a loss to Kansas, who finished the season just 2-10 last year. Your leading tackler and team leader from last season is back at the middle linebacker spot in preseason first-team All-Big 12 selection, DeMarvion Overshawn. Your other 2 linebackers played a lot last year as well in Brockermeyer and Aguafo, but this was a group you probably needed to upgrade. The Horns returned 2 of their starters from last year up front on the line in Collins and Adorno, but this D-line was a complete non-factor all season. I mean, visions of how long KJ Jefferson, Caleb Williams, Spencer Sanders could just sit in the pocket and wait and read the defense forever and ever without a care should be haunting this unit. They needed to upgrade here as well, but fell short. The secondary had just 31 pass deflections and 7 interceptions all of last season. They did bring in 4-star cornerback transfer from Ohio State in Ryan Watts at DB, but this defense is most definitely one of the worst in the conference. Now, something to keep an eye on. These Horns did block 4 punts and 5 field goals last year. That type of flipping the field can kind of give them a chance in tough games if the offense can get consistent. So let's look at the schedule here. Let's see, win, loss, win, win, win. I think Texas will probably be 4-1 heading into the Red River Shootout against Oklahoma. The Horns haven't beaten Oklahoma since 2018, but they've all been kind of close games for the most part. If the offense is clicking and the defense doesn't fall completely apart, I'd give them a chance. That could kind of catapult them. But then you're at Oklahoma State and at Kansas State. Texas only plays 4 true road games this year. That's pretty sweet. But it's still one of the tougher schedules in the country. I'd say 8-4 tops. Kansas State. Well, this is really kind of a sneaky off-the-radar team that I think is a lot better than the experts have them pegged. You have 3 seniors and 2 juniors across the front line. They all go over 6'3" and 290. At right tackle, Christian Duffy is a monster, 6'5", 310. And on the left side of the line, you have left guard KT Leviston at 6'5", 320. And first team All Big 12 left tackle Cooper Beebe, 6'4", 322. This team is built to run, and they do it damn well. Behind that mass of people movers is maybe, like I said, the best running back in the country in Deuce Vaughn. 1,400 yards, 18 touchdowns on the ground, 468 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving last year. Now, Skylar Thompson, last season starting quarterback, somehow got picked up by the Miami Dolphins. Don't ask me how, because he was not a great passer. Kind of like a less talented Tim Tebow, a big, burly, bruising runner. I think they've definitely upgraded, picking up Adrian Martinez, though, in the transfer portal from Nebraska. Now, I know Husker fans are going to argue that, but it was just one of those weird things, I think he'll be better in this system, and you'll see, I think Nebraska will be better with Texas transfer Casey Thompson as well. But Martinez is mobile, and I think unquestionably a better passer than Thompson was. The Wildcats' top 3 receivers are all back. Knowles and Brooks are actually pretty effective blockers in the run game as well. This Chris Kleiman offense really is kind of reminding me of the glory days under Bill Snyder. On the defense, preseason defensive player of the year in the conference, DN Felix Anudike-Uzomah anchors a relatively experienced D-line. Anudike-Uzomah collected 11 sacks all by his lonesome last year, and his returning nose tackle, Eli Higgins, picked up 3 sacks as well. In the linebacking core, Daniel Green was named first-team All-Conference after leading the team in tackles last year while collecting 3 sacks and 2 fumble recoveries. He will be the leader at middle linebacker, but the other 2 linebackers are brand new starters. The Cats did bring in a couple transfers in Kobe Savage and Josh Hayes at safety to try and stabilize a pretty decimated secondary. People forget this is a team that went 8-5 last year. They had the 96th ranked passing offense and still found a way to go 8-5. That phase of the game is going to be much better, I think, this year. Kansas State will have a test with Missouri early on, but I think they'll win that, and then they'll probably lose at Oklahoma. They should, though, win the next 3 before hosting Oklahoma State and Texas in Manhattan. You're probably losing at Baylor, but this team could go 8-4 for sure. Best prediction, somewhere between 6-6 and 8-4. This Iowa State Cyclones offense is basically a Big Ten offense. 2 tight end sets, huge offensive line, and running the ball to set up the pass. This unit was second in the country in red zone efficiency offense last year. But there are huge, and I mean huge, losses to make up for in first-team All-Conference quarterback Brock Purdy, tailback Breece Hall, and the tight end Charlie Kohler. Iowa State returns just 37% of their production on offense. We are really going to see what Matt Campbell is made of this year. Now, taking over at quarterback is redshirt sophomore Hunter Deckers. ISUCyclonesports.com rates him as the second best Iowa State recruit of the decade. He was invited to the Elite 11 camp in 2020. However, he's only thrown 43 passes in the last 2 seasons. First-team All-Conference wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson is back. Noel and Wilson, the other 2, had 0 touchdown catches, though. So you've got a pretty limited receiving core. Jarrell Brock, your new running back, had just 174 yards and 1 touchdown last year. Lots of uncertainty on this side of the ball. Iowa State's offense is going to need to take some time to develop. Now, the Cyclones had the 13th best first down defense in the country last year. And so, like I said earlier, that means you're putting your opponent behind the sticks, shrinking the playbook. But like the offense, just 43% of the defensive production is back. Will McDonald IV was first-team All-Big 12 last year at D-end. He had 11.5 sacks, but 5 of your top 6 tacklers are gone. Anthony Johnson is a solid piece in the secondary with 7 pass deflections and 2 forced fumbles last year. This will be the better unit, better than the offense for sure. Can the offense get there, though? My greater confidence in Matt Campbell than in Sonny Dykes is in his first year is basically why I have Iowa State ahead of TCU. I've seen him win 8 games with less. Iowa is down a bit, but you're on the road. Baylor's a loss. At Texas, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State is a loss. But you could knock off Kansas State at home, maybe. You are at TCU to finish the season. I'm thinking somewhere between 5-7 and 7-5 for this group. Now for TCU, the offense averaged almost 436 yards per game last year, and 82% of that production is back. Now, this offensive line had some issues last year, giving up 28 sacks. Max Duggan is back at quarterback, and he is quite mobile, but he's a little bit limited in the passing game. Wide receiver Quentin Johnston is first-team All-Big 12, and sophomore Quincy Brown comes up to join this experienced but not super talented receiving core. There are a lot of players back, but a completely new coaching staff under Sonny Dykes and new schemes are going to take some time to implement. On the defensive side of the ball, possibly the most talented player in the conference is defensive back Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. He is not only a first-team all-conference selection, but you'll see in the secondary, but you'll see him returning kicks from time to time. He may even make his way onto the field in an offensive set here or there. In the linebacking group, Johnny Hodges transferred in from Navy. He had 50 tackles, a sack, interception, and forced fumble last year. He joins, no relation, by the way, Jamoy Hodges at middle linebacker. That's a decent position group. In comes Mark Perry at safety from Colorado, who is impressive. Listen, the D-line is inexperienced, but there's decent talent elsewhere. For the third time, this is a brand new coaching staff, so temper expectations a bit, especially early. They will be tested at Colorado, but certainly could get that win. At SMU will be the real measuring stick game. Whoever wins that could probably be on their way to an 8-win season. You're at Texas and at Baylor late in the schedule. This Horned Frog squad is going to need to kind of win toss-ups like at West Virginia and Iowa State at home to get to 6 wins. Now to West Virginia. I'm thinking at this point the athletic director, Shane Lyons, is wishing he would have ponied up the money to keep Dana Holgorsen back in 2018. I mean, in the last 3 years with Holgorsen at coach, the Mountaineers won 25 games. In the 3 years since, they've won just 16. Houston is pretty clearly the best group of 5 team in the country. They could go undefeated, and they're set to join the Big 12 next year. I'll leave that up to you, West Virginia fans, to discuss amongst yourselves, though. As for this year, well, the beleaguered and exhausting era of Jarrett Doege in Morgantown has finally come to an end. This year's Mountaineer squad welcomes in, I think, the best quarterback probably since Pat White and former 5-star quarterback Georgia transfer JT Daniels. And yes, West Virginia fans, he is better than Will Grier. But wow, is the cupboard bare. Your best returning receiver, Bryce Ford Wheaton, had just 575 yards and just 3 touchdowns last season. Your other 2 starters are sophomores, Caden Prather and Reese Smith, who each had just 12 catches all of last year. That's an average of 1 catch per game. Your best weapon last year, Letty Brown at halfback, is now an LA Charger. And you'll be starting Tony Mathis, who just had 312 yards and 0 touchdowns out of the backfield last season. A brand new sophomore starter at left tackle makes me worry for the health and well-being of JT Daniels. I can't see why Daniels would have wanted to join this offense, but he did. Now, something that flew under the radar last year is that this Mountaineers defense was 5th best in the country in the red zone, a true bend-but-don't-break effort. But this defense lost their 3, count them again, 3 leading tacklers from last year. You're starting 2 sophomores and 2 freshmen, 3 of which are in the secondary. You have some consistency with linebacker Lance Dixon at will and stud D tackle Dante Stills, his first team All Big 12. The season really starts week 2 because Pat Narduzzi's pit bunch are going to just blow out this Mountaineer squad. You're hosting Kansas is a must win, and at Texas Tech is as well. Listen, with all the turnover, if for some reason JT Daniels can't stay on his feet, this could get way out of hand for the Mountaineers. I'm thinking 4 wins on the top end this year. Now Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are the only team in the conference that didn't have a single player named to the preseason first team all-conference. Remember, Tech fired their coach Matt Wells last year after losing at home to Kansas State. They were 5-3 at that time. They finished out the regular season with 1 win and 3 losses. I thought this was a bad fire at the time, but in comes Joey McGuire, who is a defensive-minded coach. Well, the offense is going to be terrible, and he's not going to be able to help improve that all that much. Starting quarterback Tyler Shook is talented, yes, but he's coming off of a collarbone injury. And like with West Virginia, the rest of the cupboard is really pretty dang bare. You have 3 new starters on the offensive line. Your tight end is a sophomore first-time starter. You're starting 3 receivers combined for just 3 touchdowns last year. You return the same running back stable, but Brooks and Roderick both had fewer than 600 yards last year. Not super impressive. The Red Raiders were 119th in the country in pass yards allowed in 2021 on the defense, and they brought in only 1 transfer in the offseason. That is embarrassing. Their top 4 leading tacklers are all gone. Jalen Hutchings is probably your best player on this unit at nose tackle. He had 3.5 sacks last year. They're going to need him to get 12 this year. Now, this schedule is really tough for the Red Raiders this year. If they can get a win over Murray in week 1, and yes, I said if they can get a win over Murray in week 1, I don't see them having even a chance in their next 5 games. West Virginia at home, you have a chance, and Kansas at home on November 11th as well. Those are the only 3 games I see them winning this season. Probably 3-9 for Texas Tech. And finally, Kansas. Now, the Jayhawks have been terrible for a long time, as we know, but they really improved kind of throughout the season last year. Their last 3 games were a win over Texas, a 3-point loss at TCU, and just a 6-point loss to West Virginia. They returned the 10th most production in the country on both sides of the ball, 82% of that on offense. Another offseason of development. I mean, this Kansas team will be better than we're used to seeing. Now, Jalen Daniels is expected to be the starter ahead of Jason Bean. Bean is much more mobile, but Daniels is a better pocket passer. I think they're kind of interchangeable, in my opinion. Devin Neal is back for his second year starting at running back. He had 707 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. You do have 3 sophomores starting on the O-line, though. So, we'll need to see some development out of that O-line. This defense was second to last in the country in scoring defense last year, giving up more than 42 points per game. But they, too, returned 89%, similar hope. They did pick up several transfers. Development and cohesion can improve this unit. Like I mentioned, defensive back Kenny Logan Jr. is a preseason first-team all-conference selection. But outside of him, I don't really have as much hope on this side of the ball for the Jayhawks. Yes, it's a fact the Jayhawks have the least talent in the conference, that is for sure. But, consistency and returning production will be what they're kind of leaning on. For this team, this is a pretty tough schedule as well. Tennessee Tech and Duke are probably the only possible wins here. But remember, this team knocked off Texas last year, so they could surprise, a Texas Tech, a West Virginia, somebody like that. All right, let's take one last look here at our power rankings heading into the 2022 college football season. Once again, I think Kansas has improved. Clear cut, I think top 2, Oklahoma State. Baylor, Texas, Kansas State, kind of interchangeable, 3 to 5. And then, I have TCU talent-wise at 7, but, I could see them finish in the top 6 or 5. So, with all that being said, let's close things out with a look at some of the marquee matchups in the first couple of weeks here for our Big 12 teams. On Thursday, September 1st, West Virginia at Pittsburgh. I already told you I think that's going to probably be a blowout, but it is a rivalry game, so there's a lot of motivation. It's the first game of the season. You don't usually see people's team's best stuff right out of the gate. So we'll see. Remember, Pitt is starting a new quarterback in Keaton Slovis as well, and they just lost the Biletnikoff Award winner, wide receiver Jordan Addison. I do think Pittsburgh's going to still win that pretty resoundingly. The next day, Friday, September 2nd, TCU travels to Boulder, Folsom Field to take on Colorado. Colorado has a real serious problem, probably one of the biggest quarterback issues in the country. But this one could be kind of a slow, grogging defense, running game type of game, and could be tougher than TCU expects. I do think TCU will get the win, but it's going to be a closer game than a lot of people are thinking. The following Saturday, though, this is your marquee slate of games. Everyone's going to be talking about Alabama at Texas. I don't think Texas is ready for this yet. Alabama's going to probably cruise to a win. Texas development with Quinn Ewers and some of the younger talent, maybe later in the season, they maybe could give Alabama a better game. But right out of the gate, I think it's just bad timing. You then have Missouri at Kansas State. This one's going to show us a lot about who Kansas State is with Adrian Martinez at quarterback. Houston travels to Texas Tech. Remember now, Texas Tech beat Houston last year at Houston, one of Houston's only 2 losses all year. I think Houston's going to have revenge on the mind. They'll probably get the win. Then you have Iowa State traveling to Iowa. Now, Iowa's going to be down. Their offense is not good coming into this year. This one is going to be a straight-up Midwest battle, running the ball a lot, 2 tight end sets, strong defenses. But I think Iowa State has a chance. Iowa will be favored, but Iowa State has a chance. And then our final game, Saturday, September 10th. This one, I think, is the marquee. Everyone's going to be talking about Alabama, Texas, but Baylor at BYU. BYU is a very talented bunch. They return a ton of talent. Can Baylor match that level? It's going to be fun to check out, fun to watch. So we made it through another conference preview. Give me your feedback. Tell me where I got it right, where I got it wrong. Tell me if there's any information I'm missing out on. Give me your feedback at RightOnQCS on Twitter or to the email rightonqcs@gmail.com. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep moving forward with these conference previews. I think the ACC preview is the next one I have slated up. Thanks for joining. Thanks for checking us out. You have been watching Right On Cue College Sports. I'm your host, Tyson Quiller, and we will get at you next time.